Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for Gotham Season 1, Episode 8, The Mask. And I was actually really looking forward to this episode because of the way last week's episode ended. I thought that was amazing. I really liked the cliffhanger of last week's episode, and I really loved the direction Gotham was going in overall. It seemed like they were getting rid of the whole Case of the Week format, and unfortunately, that's not happening because this episode, I still really enjoyed it. I thought it was overall a good episode, probably like the third or fourth best episode of the season. Last week's episode was definitely 10 times better. The last two episodes were definitely a lot better than this one, but there were things about this episode I really liked. The only thing was that the case in this episode was really been there, done that. It wasn't that interesting. And just, I understand that they want the show to be a procedural show, but it works so well as a serial drama that I thought that they would just get rid of the whole procedural element because it doesn't exactly work because you have the procedural element and then you have a bunch of other plots. So because of that, I'm not really going to talk about the procedural element that much. There are some things I do want to talk about definitely. Basically Jim and Harvey in this episode, we're gonna talk about what was going on with them, but let's just get to this episode because there were a lot of things that I definitely really enjoyed about this episode. Mainly the subplots, but a couple things with Jim as well. So Jim and Harvey were basically investigating this murder about this brutal fight club, basically because there was this guy who hides in an office and another worker throws a trash can at him, and they grapple, and they each wear a knit mask. They engage in a brutal back and forth scuffle, hitting each other with fists and objects, and one finally kills the other with his sword. The winner pulls off his mask, holds his arm in victory. He stares in the camera that's filming them. The viewer flicks the screen off, and Edward checks out the victim the next morning as Jim and Harvey show up. So the body has a gash on the side of his neck, and he's covered in ink or some other black stain, and Ed says he died at midnight but was moved there a couple of hours ago. They wonder if he was mugged, but muggers don't usually move bodies, and they wonder if he was attacked for being a financer. And Ed asks if he should run all the prints, including the one from the finger he extracts from the corpse's throat. So I thought that was interesting, but my thing with this was that it's just really been there, done that. I understand they're trying to investigate a murder. Whoop-de-doo. I do understand why they're doing that because, I mean, they're trying to get back to their lives after the whole scare with Jim last week. It does make sense why they went back to doing this. I just don't like that they make this front and center. They made this, but the thing was with this episode, it wasn't really front and center. The case was not really the whole thing of this episode. The subplots were definitely more in this episode. Because Oswald approaches a woman on the street who's chatting on her cell phone. He compliments her brooch and asks to have it for a friend, and she's very disturbed, and he says please, and then he takes it. He shows up at Fish's place and says he wanted to make a gesture of friendship. And he slides a gift across the table and says he hopes they can be friends again. She accepts, and I'm pretty much not buying a thing he's saying, because as we know, Oswald's working for Falcone. We know that. We saw that at the end of last week's episode, that the two of them are working together, and anything that Oswald says, I'm pretty much just going to call bullshit here for what he says. So she's disturbed. He says please, and then he takes. He shows up at. I just read this. Fish asks Timothy if he knew Oswald used to carry her umbrella like he does now, but has a seat at the table. She opens the gift, slams the letter opener into his hand. He gestures his guard back and tells her that was uncalled for. She says she treated him like a son. He betrayed her. He says he suffered, and she says she ordered him dead, and he should be dead. She tells him to pray for Falcone's good health because he lives at the Dawn Sufferance, and says to convey his respects to Falcone, and she calls him friend and tells him to go in peace. He leaves but bleeding and angry. So the most interesting thing in this episode came in the next scene, which was when Alfred takes Bruce to school. Now, one of the things people have been complaining about is that every time we've seen Bruce in this show, it's been in the mansion with Alfred, and that's really all we've seen. The first time this episode, the first time in the show, we've seen Bruce not in the mansion, which I really like seeing. I really like seeing Bruce at school. I like seeing how he deals with his parents' murder, and we can tell right away that it's not good because he takes Bruce to school and tells him it's inevitable, but Bruce says he prefers homeschool, and Alfred says he needs to be around children his own age, which makes sense, and Bruce says he finds kids childish, and Alfred asks he doesn't want to be normal, and Bruce asks him to prove his case for normalcy, but Alfred says he has to go in and tells him to go have a good day. So, Jim meets up with the mom of the beating victim. I don't want to talk much about this. Nothing much really to say there. Now, basically, we do find out something very interesting on this episode, because Essen and Harvey are chatting, and he tells her that Jim is annoyed and thinks the other cops are cowards for bailing him to face Victor on his own, because Remember, Victor was there and all the other cops just left. They just left him. They didn't care. And, Victor Zaz, he's like, I'm Victor Zaz, and then they all left, and she says that Jim will have to get over it, and says he's lucky he has Harvey. That I really enjoyed, definitely. I really like what was going on there, thought that was very interesting, and Oswald takes the brooch he stole to his mom. She sees his wounded hand and is angry and wants him to tell his boss and the person who hurt him. And she tells him when he was in school, a girl named Magda was mean to him, but the teacher did nothing about it. So she says she denounced Magda's father to the secret police to have her avenged, and she hears a rat trap snap and is thrilled, and she says she had to just figure out his secret to get him to take the bait. And basically that happens. So Harvey and Jim are still investigating on the case pretty much. And Alvarez complains to Jim that he arrested the doc since he serves as CI. And he says how he's screwing the rest of them, and Jim asks how he likes it. And Harvey tries to get him to back down and asks him to let the doc guy, and he says they can go check out the local of the business card they left of Thumbless Guy's pocket. And Jim refuses to let him go, and Harvey has to tell Alvarez to zip it. One of my complaints this episode definitely, though, had to do with Ed. They had some really great stuff going on with Edward in Spear of the Goat. They had some really great plots going on with him. It seemed like he was getting his own plot line. It seemed like something was going to happen with him. Completely dropped. Not even mentioned this episode. There's no mention of that Kristen Kringle girl. No mention of her at all. And I was liking that. I was liking the comedic stuff they were putting in there. I was liking that he had his own plot, and they just completely abandoned it in this episode. So, definitely that was a problem for me. So, Barbra pulls a gun on Jim when he comes home late, and he tells her she shouldn't be handling a gun when she's drinking, and she says she can feel Victor stalking her everywhere and calls him a monster. He says he's just a man, not a monster, and promises him to protect her from Victor, and she asks him to promise that he'll be okay and that there are no monsters. She tells him to lie if he has to, and he does. And I definitely really like seeing that scene, because the thing I definitely really enjoyed about that is that we're seeing that Barbra is pretty much scared for her life right now. Sorry guys, I'm just getting my phone. She's pretty much scared for her life right now because of the fact that she almost was killed last week. She was. So I definitely enjoyed really watching that scene. I thought that was very well done. And I overall definitely really enjoyed that. I thought that was definitely really good in my opinion. So basically, there are two men in suits locked in cages. A masked man is there, and they ask when they're going to get out of there, and he says, that's up to you. Hands them back black knit masks like the other fighters wore. And next morning, Barbra tells Jim she's okay, and he can leave the spare gun. She says she can handle what's going on. He says he wishes life wasn't like this, and she asks if she really means that. She tells him to go catch bad guys. He kisses her and leaves. And basically that continues the whole case thing, which I don't really want to talk about because there's not really much to say there because it's pretty much just really filler. So some girls say hi to Bruce at school, and then Tommy and his buddy come to talk to him. And they ask about his parents' death if he saw it, and Bruce says he doesn't want to talk about it. Tommy asks if they were guts. Bruce walks away from them. You can tell he's getting bullied because of this, and that was definitely very sad. I really felt bad for Bruce, but I pictured that to happen definitely to Bruce because he is definitely very different from everyone else in his school, which I definitely really like seeing. So Lysa goes to confession to meet Fish in a confessional booth, and Fish says it's the best way to keep it secret from Falcone. She gives Fish an update for all the things she does for Falcone, and Fish tells her she needs to copy 2 pages out of the ledger in his desk. She says she'll need this key, and Lysa asks how to get it. And Fish says she left a vial in the other room for her and says it will make him sleep for 2 hours. And Lysa asks if it will kill him. And Fish asks if she cares for the old man. She says no and that it won't hurt him. And Lysa asks if one of Falcone's men catches her snooping. And Fish says she'll likely be dead. Basically, that's obviously not going to be good. So then we see more of the case and everything. I don't really want to talk too much about it. As I said, I don't want to talk much about it. So some boys corner Bruce on the stairs, and they mock him for being an orphan. And he asks Tommy why he's being unkind. The kid mentions Bruce's mother. He slaps him in the face and says not to talk about his mother. And Tommy doesn't take kindly being smacked for his bullying size. He's like, "Oh, really?" Like, that was just, like, I was surprised that he did that, but definitely Bruce is going to do some serious damage to him. I can tell he is. He's full of rage. I mean, he becomes a vigilante, so obviously Bruce is going to do some serious damage. Plus, it was kind of spoiled for me, so Timothy is dragged in before Oswald, and he reminds him that they met at Fish's, and he says he has some questions for him and shushes Timothy. His cronies beat the guy good to warm him up. Harvey and Jim then have the thumb. Basically, that was definitely very crazy what was going on there. And Essen brings up to Jim how she knows he's still working on the Wayne case. Not really much to talk about there. Bruce comes out of school and Alfred notices he's been in a scuffle, and Bruce says someone disrespected his mother. Alfred says he hopes he broke his teeth, and Bruce says the guy was a lot bigger than him and he doesn't know how to fight, and Alfred's pretty pissed because he wants him to be able to fight. He wants to protect him, and I definitely really enjoyed that because Bruce needs to learn how to defend himself, and I definitely really like that Alfred wants to teach him how to fight, and I definitely enjoyed that a lot. So, basically, Barbra calls Jim, and he says he can't talk, and cuts off the call. She's not happy, and Lysa fixes tea for Falcone. When one of his henchmen come in and startles her, she says it's almost ready, pours the vial that Fish gave her into the cup before serving it up, and I was very surprised. I didn't know what was going to happen here. So, Selina is caught stealing fur coats. We briefly see Selina again this episode. And Alfred gives Bruce his dad's watch, and they are in front of Tommy's house, and Alfred tells him not to be scared. Bruce says he's not, he's just visualizing what he wants to do. He runs to the door, rings the buzzer, and Tommy comes to the door and asks what the hell he's doing there. Bruce beats him down, tells him to never talk about his mother again, and after a few punches, Alfred calls him off. Tommy says he tried to kill him, and Alfred tells him to remember the next time, and remember that he let him do it. So, I thought that was really awesome that he did that, and just, wow, that was really awesome, definitely. And I was very happy for Bruce, because he wanted to do that. So, Alfred asks what he wants for dinner, and he asks for pizza, and he takes a happy Bruce away, and you can tell that, he's very happy that he did that job. So, I really like this next scene. I thought this was definitely very interesting. Something I personally really enjoy about this episode, because we see a crowd of, Harvey's trying to get some cops to help run down addresses where Jim might be, because they don't know where he is. Jim is getting beaten up by the criminal in this episode, Richard. He's getting beaten up by him. And they end up blowing him off, and I love what Harvey says. He goes into a scream rant and tells him he won't let them wimp out again, because they abandoned him, and they've refused to help him last week, so they can't turn their back on him now, and I thought that was definitely really good, because I agree with Harvey. They should have stayed with Jim. They should have been there for him, because he would have been there for them, and I definitely agree with what Harvey is saying there, and I definitely really enjoyed that, in my opinion. I thought that was definitely very well done, and I really enjoyed that scene. So, Jim ends up defeating Richard, of course. We knew he would. So, an older woman sings on the stage at Fish's place, and Lysa shows up, and Fish tells her to stay back for a moment. The woman finishes, Fish applauds her, then gestures Lysa over. She asks why she's there in broad daylight, and Lysa says she wants out because Falcone's gonna find out. She asks Fish if it's worth it. She tells her she's rich and people are afraid of her and asks isn't that enough. And Fish says it's not. She says she grew up in a one-bedroom place with cold water and slept behind a curtain while her mom serviced men. She says one of Falcone's men killed her because he didn't like the service. And Fish says she laid by her mom's dead body all night and says she promised herself no man would ever have power over her again. Lysa hands over the requested ledger pages and says it will undo Falcone. So, Fish tells Lysa she knows she's scared, but promises she won't let anything happen to her. She tells a girl to say, I believe you, Mom, and she does, and Fish kissed her on the cheek, and, that was definitely very good, because you can see that Lysa doesn't really want to be a part of this plan, but she really can't get out of it. So Oswald asks Timothy about Fish's secrets. He says he thinks he's holding back. Timothy says he heard her talking to Butch about a friend with Falcone, and Fish has someone close to Falcone, and Oswald thanks him, and tells his men no one can find the body since they are officially a piece, and Timothy begs, but they slice him up anyway, so that was definitely very crazy. And then basically at the end of the episode, we get to the end of the episode, basically, and as I said, they did catch the guy. Obviously, we knew they would catch the guy. We knew everything would be good there. So, basically, Jim and Harvey, they talk and everything, and Harvey tells him to go home, and the woman come over to Fish, and it's her mom. We find out who that woman is that Fish was talking to, and it turns out that this is Fish's mom, and she's demonstrably not dead. So, obviously, she lied, and I'm trying to figure out why Fish lied about this. I definitely thought that was very weird, because her mom's service men and everything, and obviously, they didn't kill her, so why is she saying this? I think she pretty much just said this because she wants to motivate Lysa, and basically make her think like she's right all the time, so she will trust her, but she lied to her. So I'm definitely interested in seeing what happened there. So she tells her mom to go to sleep, and I'm wondering if Lysa's going to find out about this. Because if Lysa finds out, definitely Lysa is going to be very much like, well, why'd you lie to me? So Jim calls Barbra, but she ignores his call, sets an envelope on the desk, walks out. He leaves her a voicemail promising things will be better and telling her he loves her. Now, I know a lot of people do not like Barbra, but I personally really like what's going on with her. I do. I do like the arc of her kind of being scared that Victor's coming after them. I do think that is interesting, in my opinion, and I enjoy that. So, Alvarez comes in, tells him that they brought in a prep who asked for him. He says it was a professional B&E at a high-end store, and it turns out that it is Selina, and asks if he missed her, and I pretty much think what this is trying to show is that they are finally going to solve this murder. They're going to find out who killed the Waynes, who is involved with it, and pretty much we're going to find out as well, because we don't know yet. I still kind of feel like it's Falcone, but I don't know at this point who it could be. Maybe it could be Victor. I don't know. I don't think it'd be Victor Zaz. I don't think he really would do something like that. But I think definitely we are going to find out who killed the Waynes in the next episode, which I'm looking forward to definitely if that's where we're going with this. So Bruce tells Alfred he enjoyed beating the kid because I love the ending of this episode. He enjoyed beating the kid because he deserved it, and basically he wants Alfred to teach him how to fight, and that's how the episode ends. So overall, guys, this episode, as you can tell, was very scattered and very all over the place. And I myself, that's a problem with me. Gotham is really, really good when it focuses on a few storylines at a time. When they try to focus on 5 or 6 storylines like this episode did, this episode focused on 4 storylines, and it didn't exactly work. The case was sort of interesting. I wasn't really into it. I don't really care so much about the case because it's only going to last 1 episode. It's not that interesting to me. So because of that, I'm kind of getting tired of this procedural format, especially because it looked like last week they were abandoning that, and now they're like, oh, no, we're not abandoning that, we're going to continue doing the procedural format, and I'm not a fan of it because it's not exactly working. And, we have villains on this show, Falcone, Victor, Maroney, Fish, Oswald, now Victor. I mean, those are our 5 villains, so definitely, I want to see what's going to happen here, and I want to see more, if they want to, the next episode, I definitely feel should be focused on just these storylines, because I don't really care about the case very much at all. I did, however, care about what was going on with Jim, and how no one really would want to follow him, and nobody really trusted him. I thought that was really interesting, and I was really into that. That was one of the things I personally really did enjoy, and I thought was very well done, in my opinion. But let's talk about a few things. First of all, with Oswald, you can definitely tell that Oswald is working against Fish. We're going to have to see what happens there. I don't really know what's going to happen with Oswald. But basically, he's at peace with Fish, and he's really not. And there's not really so much about Fish, Oswald and Falcone being tight. We didn't really see much of that, and I was disappointed because that was my favorite twist of the season so far, that those two are working together, and we didn't see any of that in this episode, and I was pretty disappointed by that. Fish, I am very interested in seeing why Fish, lied to Lysa, because if she finds out, then she's obviously not going to be happy about it, and she is going to question Fish about it, because I don't think Lysa's scared of Fish. I don't think so. She's never seemed scared of Fish. She seems like that if she found out that Fish was doing something, she'd be like, okay, why are you doing it? I think that that's what she would ask her. She'd be like, okay, Fish, why are you doing this? I do like the plot of Barbra. I'm wondering if Victor is going to come after them. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. There's no Victor in this episode, so I don't know if he's going to come after them. We'll have to see what happens there. And then Bruce, I am looking forward to see Bruce fight. I think that is setting up that Bruce is going to end up probably, starting to fight people, and it's all about him getting to the road of becoming Batman. So obviously, he's not going to become Batman yet, but the other thing I was not a fan of in this episode was that we did not see a lot of Edward's plot. I actually personally really enjoyed it. I personally really enjoyed his plot. I liked his plot overall, and I didn't like that we just abandoned it like that. I wasn't a fan of it at all, pretty much. Now, as far as Bruce and Selina, they're definitely going to find out what happened to the Waynes. I'm interested in seeing that. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. I thought this was probably a lackluster episode. I wanted it to be really good, but I really was not as into it as I was with the past 2 episodes. And that's disappointing, guys, because I really was into the show, and then they had to make this episode and make me not as into it. Now, and again, as I said, it does not need to always be this way. What they need to do is just have a more focused episode and have a more focused story, and, focus, like, do what they did last week where they focused on one story throughout the entire episode, I'll be fine with that. But because they didn't do that this episode, I wasn't as big as a fan of, and unfortunately wasn't as good. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for The Flash. So I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.